Originating from the David Letterman Communications Building on the campus of Ball State University, this is Pleasant Valley Sunday. Hold on, kids. We're going to have a lot of fun tonight. Kevin Nolley here with you. I never forgot my name yet. The man called in a little while ago, and I got reprimanded for singing along with the songs. The man doesn't like that. I used that term, I don't know, maybe a year ago with one of my undergraduate classes. And I'm like, the man. They're like, who? The man? You know, and then I woke up the other day and I found out that I was the man. But hey, we've got a great show tonight. First, I'd like to shout out to all of our listeners out there in California. We love you. And we're out here in Muncie, Indiana at Ball State University, named after the Ball brothers who developed the canning jars. I know that's what you're asking. And I want to thank Paul Wilson for recommending. This is called The Show of Paul's, or Psychopolic, or something like that. We've got Paul Beach, Paul Holland, and Paul Wilson. They have all played with the association, and of course the association, their family to WCRD, and just a great group of guys. We've interviewed everyone, basically. That's the main 6, 7, with the exception of Ted Luschel. I don't know if we're ever going to get that, but if anybody has any way to help me, we'll be more than happy to interview him. And if the magic of technology is working right, let's see. Do we have Paul Beach on the air with us? Hello, Paul. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
There we go. We got it now. Hey, Paul, welcome to Pleasant Valley Sunday.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Hey, my headphones just fell apart, but what can I tell you? We're running a 2-car funeral around here. Paul, this is an exciting show tonight because we're going to have the 3 Pauls talking about their time with the association. And let me start by asking, when did you first play with the association? How did you get hooked up with them? And what instruments were you playing? In what capacity?
Well, my first performance on them on stage was actually in the middle of the Happy Together tour in 1984, where I just sang. A couple of the guys in the band had left, and so I filled in for the remainder of the Happy Together tour. And then after the Happy Together tour, they called me up, and I started full-time. So my first gig full-time with them, actually playing and singing, playing bass and singing, was, I think, New Year's Eve, leading to the year 1985.
Okay, so you started out singing in 1985. Were you by chance with the group when they? There was a show where they did Along Comes Mary, but Jules Alexander was singing lead. It was like a variety show. I want to say somebody like Marilyn McCoo was doing the announcing that day, the host.
Oh, yeah, that was Solid Gold, and that was 1988.
Okay, wow, there you go. Just pulled it right out there. What did you eventually play? And were you like playing bass and piano at a later point?
No, I just played bass, and that started in the beginning of 1985. It was during the Happy Together tour that I just sang, then 84.
Okay, and if you mentioned that, I apologize.
Right.
What were your initial feelings when you started working with the guys? Do you remember like some of the first thoughts you had, like, wow, these guys can sing?
Well, that's an interesting question because I had seen them perform so many times, and I knew them because I had done a lot of shows with them, working with Gary Puckett. So I was really familiar with what they did and who they were. And so I was excited to be a part of it. And my background is a vocal group ensemble anyway. I started at the age of 8 or 9 singing in a boys' choir and sang in ensemble groups all the way up through college. So it was a real pleasure to be able to do that in a popular music format.
When you were growing up, did you have who were your favorite groups? What particular genre of rock did you really, really dig?
I liked anything that had a good melody, a good storyline, and especially good vocals. That doesn't narrow it down a whole lot for you. I'm sorry, but
No.
I have very eclectic taste in music.
Well, but that includes a lot of association songs. Good melody,
Absolutely.
good vocals, good bass lines, everything.
Right.
Tell me a little bit. You've been you're a bass player, but do you remember the first time you picked up a musical instrument? Were your parents musical? Were you kind of forced to go to piano lessons at the age of 3 or something?
Something like that. Hi, Mom. She's listening.
All that money, it sure paid off.
Yeah, it was a wonderful experience. No, actually, both my parents are musicians, piano players, pianists, and my dad was also a composer and a music professor. And they attempted to give me lessons from a lady in the neighborhood, in the town we grew up in. And I didn't take to it real well. I fought it because I wanted to be outside playing, and I was probably 6 or 7 at the time, I guess. But in terms of actually picking up an instrument on my own and wanting to do it myself, I think I was about 16 or 17 and picked up guitar, started playing that.
Well, we've all been there where we took piano lessons and we had to practice, and we all started with chopsticks, and I get that. But so music is really in the very fabric of your soul. You know, if your parents had that talent, you know, I get where you're coming from with that. When you were on stage with the association, do you have any fond memories of a particular incident or something that happened randomly that is just something you wouldn't mind sharing with us?
Oh, there are so many. I'll just have to pick one, I guess. I have 2 favorite memories, I guess. One of them is the first time I sang with them on stage. I remember the rest of the bands from the Happy Together tour lining up behind the stage, looking to see how this was going to sound because it was a new lineup. And we had rehearsed down here in Southern California for a couple of days before we went back out, and it was at the Pikes Peak Convention Center, or the Civic Center in Colorado Springs. And I just remember the first couple of notes that we hit, everybody just hit it dead on. They were so motivated, and everybody had their ears on, so to speak, and brought their A game. And the show went so well. We thought it would sound good, but I didn't anticipate how good it would sound and how good it would feel. Got goosebumps. I'm getting goosebumps right now thinking about it. The other time would be we played at the Grand Ole Opry.
Wow.
And that was such a thrill. We didn't even know we were playing at the building itself because our itinerary just said Opryland, and we thought we were playing out in the park somewhere. But it turned out that we were actually playing in the main room, and I guess our shows sold out really fast, and we were there 1 or 2 days. I don't remember. Paul Holland might be able to fill us in on that. But I just remember that those people were so together and had everything prepared for us in every manner you could possibly think of. Speaking of the staff of the Grand Ole Opry. And we walked into the building after they showed us our green rooms, and there's all this equipment on stage. And I told Bruce, that looks like the kind of setup that we have, thinking it was for another band, right?
Right.
And we went over and looked and said, everything's exactly right. And then, man, I wish our setup was like this. Anyway, the stage manager came over and says, you guys ready for sound check? And when we said, we're playing here? And he said, yes, you are. And so we're really excited to have you guys here. And it was kind of unusual to have popular music bands in there as opposed to more country music-oriented bands. So that's what caught us by surprise. But they had bought the Greatest Hits CD and had studied it, set up everything, and dialed in our microphones to the extent that our sound check took about 10 minutes. And normally it was a lot longer than that because of all the open vocal mics. And that was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. It sounded so good in there, and we were so honored to be there, and I'm still excited just talking about it. Then my daughter, Ruth, ended up working there years later, and kind of came full circle on that.
Hey, you mentioned a few things in that last statement. You were talking about Bruce Pictor, the drummer.
Yes.
Bruce is a great guy. What are your feelings?
And a great drummer.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts on his drumming.
Oh, my God. I actually first saw Bruce playing with Gary Puckett in San Diego in 1980, late 80, maybe early 81. And I went to listen to Gary Puckett's band because I'd heard that he was looking for a bass player, and Gary was from San Diego. And I knew Gary's brother Brian from up here in North San Diego County where I live. And on the advice of a mutual friend, I went and checked them out. Then I went and talked to Brian and told him I was interested in auditioning. So he introduced me to Gary, and I had seen Bruce play, and when I saw him play, I said, I want to play in this band. Of course, Gary sang great, and the rest of the band sounded great, but Bruce was just such a heartbeat of the band. And Gary's brother, Brian, too, was a real solid drummer, and they would switch off between drums and percussion. And I just so wanted to play in that band. But the moment I really remember was our first rehearsal when we started working on our first song, and it was one of the Gary and his brothers wrote songs that they called it their publishing company was called the Puckett Brothers. And I don't remember which song it was, but I remember the feeling that I felt when we first started playing. And Bruce and I just were like a hand in glove. It was just magic from the very beginning. And from that point on, it was just really working on interpretation and subtleties and trying to figure out a way to make the song work and constantly working on that stuff. And it was like going to school for me. But getting paid to do it and just having so much fun along the way. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Brucero, if you're listening, we love you. I mean, Bruce is, he is a just genuinely graceful guy. He is just humble. Love talking with him. Very personable. And if you're friends with him on Facebook, if you're not, you should be. Hey, if you're just joining us right now, you're listening to Pleasant Valley Sunday here on CRD, and our guest is Mr. Paul Beach, a great musician himself. We're talking about when he played with the association. If you've got a question for him, you can just send that question to me on Facebook. You can find me there at KEVIN NOLLEY, and if I can, and it's an appropriate question, I'll sure pose it. Hey, you mentioned something. You grew up in California, right, along the coast?
No, about an hour east of the coast, okay. In Riverside, California.
Were you a surfer?
I wanted to be.
Okay.
I actually moved down to the coast in 1973 and started surfing then.
Okay. Well, I being landlocked here in Indiana, it's a stereotype. I know the other day, or a couple weeks back, we had a great actress, Chelsea Swain, on, and she's out there from Malibu originally. And I said, "Did you grow up with a pool?" And she goes, "No, we grew up with the ocean across the street." So, every time I think of surfers and blonde hair and, Converse tennis shoes and things like that, stereotyping. But anyway, I had to ask that. Hey, tell us, you sent us a link to a song, and I'm pulling that up now, and I believe is it called Slidin' By?
Yes, sir.
Tell me a little bit about that and its genesis.
That's a really good word to describe that, actually.
Well, hey, I majored in Latin. It's okay.
Did it work?
There,
Let's start at the beginning then. I was at a point in my life, and I think most people that are involved with any kind of creative endeavor encounter this, that I was going through an identity crisis, didn't know what I wanted to do, where I belonged. I was not out on the road anymore, but I was still involved with music, and a friend of mine told me that I should start writing songs. And I had stabbed at it a bit back in the 70s and got discouraged with it and got involved with other things in life. But I tried to figure out, based on my friend's advice, and he really kept after me, what I should write about. And so I started looking online for inspiration, and I kept seeing the same thing over and over again. It says, write what you know. Don't try to be something you aren't. So I thought, well, what am I feeling? Well, my feeling is I am so completely undecided about who I want to be, what I want to do, where I belong. Maybe I'll just write about that anguished feeling that you have about trying to figure it out and not even knowing how to try to figure it out. So the song is based on that, and then it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek here and there with the lyrics about what I would do if I had A, B, or C.
You know, Paul, I'm 48, and I'm still working on my personal trajectory. And, you know, you wrote that in your 20s, I assume, right?
No.
Okay, I apologize.
I was in my wait a minute. I was my mid-50s.
Okay, I'm sorry. I for some reason, I don't know why I was thinking the 20s, but it's interesting how we use music as a medium, as a therapeutic tool. And I had this conversation with Terry Kirkman before. And I'd love to find, I have these archives scattered all over the place. Paul Wilson, you probably have that. But I can tell by just describing the narrative here that you use this in a way to, you know, better your life and to answer questions. Do you think at any point that, you know, you were kind of suffering from depression or anxiety during that time?
Oh, absolutely.
And
yes.
Did you find that in general, picking up an instrument just kind of released that as like a catharsis?
Yeah. That was a surprising thing. When I got to the point where I had a mix that I was happy with, I sat down and listened to it in an environment completely separate from the studio, which I like to do to remove myself from that work environment. And I got through with it, and I just had this big smile on my face, you know, and wasn't at all like the feeling I had when I wrote the song, you know?
Right. I get that. I'm not a great musician. I actually went to college on a voice scholarship, but I get that, and I think our listeners do too. Before we play the song, I have a question here. Somebody is asking, did you ever play with the Mamas and Papas?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell us a little bit about that, the dates, a little bit about, you know, reflecting on that? Did you work with Michelle Phillips, or was she in at that time? Or?
No.
Okay.
I knew that the people in the band, you got to understand all of these, well, you know this already from talking to other musicians, that all these bands work so much together that everybody kind of knew each other. We're so used to doing shows with each other. And so when I got invited to play, it was just kind of like joining family. The history of going back a bit on that was that Spanky, who replaced Mama Cass in the band, from Spanky and Our Gang, Spanky McFarlane.
And if you... I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. I was just going to jump in. If those of you that forgot, Spanky and Our Gang did I'd Like to Get to Know You.
They Will Never Be the Same.
That's right.
Give a Damn.
Yeah, Give a Damn. Some great songs, but just wanted to give people a little background. Go ahead, Mr. Beach.
Okay. Back in 82 or 83, Spanky had been singing with the Mamas and Papas, and then John decided to take a break, John Phillips, that is. And we were talking one day at one of the shows, and we said, why don't you just come play with us? And so we talked to Gary and our road manager, Gary Puckett, and said, why don't we try it? So long story short, it worked out. So she was using Gary's band as her backup band, and also did that on the Happy Together tour. So I already had history with playing with her, and already had a lot of her songs under my belt, plus some Mamas and Papas songs that she covered in the show. So when they were looking for a bass player, this would have been in 89, she mentioned me, and then I knew a couple of guys in the band as well. So they called me up, asked me if I'd be interested, but they wanted me to look for a drummer out here on the West Coast, and asked if there's somebody I was interested in playing with. And I said, absolutely, because there's a guy by the name of Dave Bronson, really good drummer. He played with the Righteous Brothers for about 35, maybe 40 years. he and I are both from Riverside, and we had joked for years and years about playing the same band together at some point. So I called him up, asked him if he was interested, and I waited till afternoon because I figured that would be the better thing to do. And he still was asleep when I called him, but he'd just gotten home from Australia. And I said, "You want to go out with the M's and P's?" And we thought we finally have our opportunity to work together. And he goes, "Man, I just got back from Australia." And just to give you some point of reference, he'd just gotten back from doing the Dirty Dancing tour with Bill Medley. And he said, "Well, where are they going?" And so, "We're supposed to be in Hawaii for 3 weeks." "Okay, call me later." Went back to sleep. So we did a couple of tours. It was a great experience. The lineup was John Phillips, Scott McKenzie. Denny had some theater obligations in Nova Scotia, so he couldn't do it. It was Spanky and Mackenzie Phillips. And so I got to work with Dave and got to work with the Mamas and Papas, and it was really interesting because it was the first band like that I played in that had so many different styles of music as opposed to a sort of a general approach to the same style with some of the other bands I played with. So it was challenging and fun, and I didn't have to sing, so I could just focus completely on playing. We were supposed to go to China and had a 6-week tour booked, China starting in Hong Kong, and had to get all our paperwork ready with the State Department. And got up one morning to get a cup of coffee and turned on CNN, and there's this guy standing in Tiananmen Square in front of a tank.
Oh, yeah. Iconic.
And that's when I knew it. I said, "Yep, we're not going." So I got a call from New York right after that. He said, "Have you seen the TV?" And I went, "Yeah." And he goes, "I'm sorry, the State Department called us and said the tour is off. All cultural exchanges are canceled." So that would have been a really exciting experience. At that time, I was going through some personal stuff, and I realized that was God's sign to me with that guy in front of that tank that I needed to stay home and be closer with my family. So it's much more complicated than that, but sometimes you just know what you need to do. And it was a hard decision, but it was an easy decision at the same time. But it was a great experience working with the Mamas and Papas, and every show went really well. I got to work also with Dusty Hanvey, guitar player, who I knew from the Grassroots and also from being from the Riverside County area. And so it was a little bit like Hold Home Week in the band. It was really nice.
Well, that is, that it was a moment in history that if, those of the age of 40 and older, we remember that. And it certainly was a period that, that certainly punctuated the timeline. Before we play your song, what are your favorite association tunes and why?
Oh, my gosh. First of all, thank you for even considering playing my song. That's really exciting for me.
Hey, we love doing this kind of stuff. And that's because, well, we really like to tell stories, especially I do. I really believe that what we do here, in addition to playing music, is we're telling a story. And this is part of you. And our listeners like it. And, I really don't know how many because, we're on the net. I know there are because we get weird questions, sometimes inappropriate comments. Ireland, Iraq one time, California. It's not a foreign country, but here in Indiana, we think so. But no, it's our pleasure to play your music. But go ahead with your favorites.
I don't know that I have any favorites. I like almost all. But I actually do like all of them. Every one of them has a different challenge for me in how to approach it. For example, the song "Everything That Touches You" has a really challenging bass line at the top of the song, and I got a chance to talk to the bass player that originally recorded that one time and asked him how he approached it. And he goes, "I don't know, I just sat down and had a couple of minutes and just played it." Thanks a lot, sir. But then he actually showed me. It was nice.
By the way, that song, "Everything That Touches You," is there's a great story from Bruce Pichter about that song. It's one of his favorites. And he tells a story about how a young woman and I think he was in high school or college, a young woman that had a great influence on his life. She brought him home and said, "I want you to hear this song." And he said it was a real life marker. I'm not doing the story justice, but that's his favorite song. And as you know, he and Jim double that now when they're playing as the full 6-piece ensemble. But
I think he doubled with maybe Paul Holland or Jules, maybe all three of them. I don't exactly remember, but I know he sang on it when we played it together as well. But certainly I love that song, Never My Love, no question. Beautiful song, Cherish, Long Comes Mary. I thought we did a really nice version of Walk Away Renee.
Oh, yeah, the Left Bank.
That was fun, that version. Along Comes Mary. It's really hard to pin down which one I like the best because every one of them had different musical things that I liked about it. That, you know, if you play a song 100 times, which we probably did, if you're really into it, you feel it and you hear it different and you always bring something different to it. You try to be as consistent as you can to play it well, but then everybody is feeling it in their own way. And as a band, you listen to each other and try to make the magic happen with the given circumstances you have. So there'll be some slight variations here and there, but at that level, where people are listening so well to each other, even the surprises that came were usually really pleasant surprises that it's not like we would change the song or anything, maybe just a tiny little different thing here and there, but the songs themselves are so strong that, well, let me put it another way. The sign of a good song, in my opinion, and from some of the songwriting classes that I took, is that you could probably play a good song in just about any style you wanted to, and it would hold up because it has a good story, it has a good melody, it has maybe another quantity about it, a subline or harmony or whatever it is that also glues that song together. So you could do just about anything you want with a good song, and I think most of the songs in the show list that we played were like that. We obviously didn't play the entire catalog on stage, but I don't think I ever really got tired of the songs for those reasons.
There you go, folks. Honest answer.
And one other.
Yeah.
We did a lot of gigs where we sang the national anthem for events, and that was one of my favorite songs to sing with them. It was just the six of us out there, sometimes with one microphone. In fact, the biggest crowd I played with them was at the start-finish line of the Winston 500 at the Charlotte Motor Speedway, if you can imagine that. And there was about 200,000 people there, and the echo was just ferocious coming off those speakers. And we're all bunched tightly together, listening to each other as well as we can. And there's one microphone there in front of us, the kind of microphone that you have in your junior high school auditorium where the teachers tap on it to see if it's working, right? And yet that was one of the most exciting experiences and sounded so good and just so thrilling that it's just one of those things that's forever embedded in my memory. And a lot of the others, too. We did a lot of national anthems for sporting events and various other community events, those kinds of things. And that was fun because you really got the essence and the soul of the band from the vocals that way.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with Paul Beach. He is an associate. You're a part of the club. It's an honor. This is our Paulology tonight, psychopolic, whatever you want to call it. Paul Beach, Paul Holland, and Paul Wilson. Paul, we want to thank you again. We're going to play out with your song Sliding By. Just a reminder, the association is out on tour with the Happy Together Tour. I believe they're out in California this week. I hope that's right. I think so. And again, we want to thank you for your time. And we want you to come back, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much, Kevin, and thank you, Paul Wilson, and my family, and all the friends that have been writing to me on Facebook and saying they're listening in. I love all you guys, and Kevin, you're doing a great thing there, and as a musician and a fellow traveler in this thing we call life, I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Everyone here sliding by. Paul Beach, 91.3 CRD. We're always better.
Sitting by the side of the road, thinking about where to go. Do I go left? Do I go right? How am I supposed to know? If I had a notion of what to do, maybe I would have a clue. Do I go back? Do I go on? What have I got to lose? I'm sliding by. Time flies, time stops, maybe or not. If I had the time, I'd own a clock. Then I know for sure if I knew or not. If there was time, I'd buy a lot. When I get the notion of what to do, maybe I'll have a clue. Then I'll go left, then I'll go right. Maybe I'll go on. I'm sliding by. Life is gliding by. I'm looking down a blind alley, both eyes tightly closed, and hiding far from the mirror and everything that I don't wanna know. Do I go left? Do I go right? Do I go left? Do I go right?
Sliding by, Paul Beach, hiding by the mirror. That was a great lyric. Great song, Paul. 91.3 CRD, you're in tune with Pleasant Valley Sunday. Kevin Nolley here with you. It is 25 minutes in front of 7 o'clock. We're going to pay a bill, take a break, and on the other side of the break, we have Paul Holland. 91.3 CRD, we are always better.
With more than 300 online courses being offered this summer, you can earn credits toward your Ball State degree while you intern, travel, or even tackle a summer job. Registration is open now, so you can view the full list of courses offered at bsu.edu/online/summer. Stay on course this summer with Ball State Online.
Man, last night we put on an epic light show.
So epic.
The crowd loved us.
Wait, there were only 4 people out there.
Yeah, but did you see their 4 faces? Their eyes lit up brighter than ours, and we're fireflies.
Yeah, we are!
And we're gonna be out here rocking out our light show at a forest near you, so come check us out.
Check us out!
Whether you're rocking their world or they're rocking yours, some memories never fade. Come alive with the forest. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a forest near you. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
You know, nothing beats the feeling of sitting around a campfire at twilight, the sun burning faintly over the horizon. You know that feeling? That's WCRD.
It sure is. 91.3 CRD, always better. Kevin Nolley here with you, Pleasant Valley Sunday. Hey, I'd like to remind everybody, hey, if you need coursework, you want to get ahead, take some classes, check us out, bsu.edu. We have great online classes. all the way from undergraduate coursework to doctoral work. I should know because I teach one of those classes. It's called Reasons for Living. No. Sorry. True story. True story. I was a high school teacher about 20, 25 years ago. I don't know. Long enough to know better. It was not a good time because we were going through cuts, riffs. And I was one of the few in the school that got riffed. I taught Latin. This wasn't a big thing. It happens, especially when you teach one of these odd courses like I did. But the basketball coach was a big school in Indianapolis, so it was very important. Basketball coach, he actually had less time in on the job in the school system. True story. But they weren't going to cut him because he taught a course called Skills for Living. Well, I was pretty ratcheted up back in those days, and I was going to stick it to the man. So I go up to the principal and I said, yeah, I see you kept your buddy there to teach Reasons for Living. So anyway, that's my story. I'm sticking to it. Hey, 22 minutes in front of 7 o'clock. If you've just joined us, we're talking. This is our Psychopolic, our Paul trilogy. We just got off the phone with Paul Beach. Now we're going to be shortly talking with Mr. Paul Holland. Mr. Paul, are you there with us? Mr. Holland? I don't think we have him yet. Let me try something again here. Do we have you?
Oh, hello.
There, we got you.
There you are. How you doing, Kevin?
I'm telling you what, I can never figure out this phone system. Oh, my gosh. I could mess up a two-car funeral. I know I say that all the time. This is a game.
I've been to a two-car funeral, and it's no fun. You got to throw water balloons out the window to hit the other car.
That's right. Anyway, did you catch that last story about Reasons for Living?
Yes.
Was it funny, or did it fall flat? I thought it was pretty good.
No, it's fantastic.
All right, great. Hey, guys, Paul Holland, he is a current member. He is an associate. You are on the stage. You play guitar, 6-string guitar. And
I do. I play guitar and I sing also.
Yes.
You have to do that to be in the association.
That's right. There are 12 instruments, 6 vocals.
12 instruments,
That's right. That's what an old disc jockey friend of mine said. And he said in Central Indiana, you just never really heard bands in the 60s try to cover association tunes because they were too difficult. Okay? And that makes sense.
That's true. And Russ has said a few times, it's like there's 12 people in the band because there's 6 of us singing, but we're also 6 of us playing instruments. So we're doing double duty there. It's like the work of 12 people being done by 6.
Yeah, I mean, that is amazing. And one of my favorite albums is the Renaissance album. It's their second album. And I believe Jim's brother, Jerry Esther, produced that. And talking to him, I've had him on the show. It's been 5 or 6 years ago. But he mentions how everybody, Terry Kirkman could play a lot of things. If it was like flugelhorn on Looking Glass or what have you, they were playing. And sometimes they had to overdub. Terry would probably play 2 or 3 things on certain songs. So,
Terry played all kinds of things.
Oh, yeah. Hey, tell us about how you became connected to the association, what your first encounters were like, and, let's start out that way.
Okay, great. Well, I worked in a music store at the time with a friend of mine named Joe Retta, who is now the lead singer for The Sweet. And anyway, the association was one of our accounts. And so they would come in once in a while and buy equipment, buy things to go out on the road with. One day, the guy came in and he said, "Hey, our keyboard player is leaving, and we're gonna need another keyboard player." And I said, "Well, hey, I play keyboards. Could I come down and try out?" And he says, "Well, sure." So I packed up my keyboard and I went down to a studio, and they were all there. The whole band was there. And I walked in and I set up my keyboard, never touched it. And they wanted to hear me sing. They said, okay, well, sing this. Do you know this song? And it was Never My Love. And it was the ba-ba-ba-ba, the whole harmony thing in the middle of the song. And I said, well, yeah, I know that. So they said, okay, sing it. Okay, I sang it. And they said, well, okay, sing it again. And so I sang it again. They were all singing with me. And then they said, okay, sing it once more. Okay. So I did it once more with them. And I was going, oh, man, this is cool. So then they said, well, why don't you go outside for a minute so we can talk about you? So I said, okay. So I went outside and waited. And then they came back to the door and they said, all right, come on back in. So I went back in and Jules spoke up and he said, well, we already know you can sing and you sing really good, you know, and if you can't play, then the hell with you. If you can play, do you want to go on tour? I said, well, sure, that'd be great. So we went out on the road, and that was the beginning of my wonderful ride with the band.
Do you remember, Paul, who was in the room?
Yes, it was the original guys at the time were Larry, Russ, and Jules, and then Bruce was the drummer. Paul was the bass player. So in addition to P3 now, we had P2 then.
Okay. Now, again, remind me what year that was.
That was about 86.
86.
Somewhere around 86.
Okay, so you've been affiliated quite a long time. Let's step back. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Southern California.
Okay. And were you from a musical family? Did you take lessons like Paul Beach and go to piano practice 6 times a week?
I did not. I grew up with a piano, an organ, and a pump organ in the house, and then banjos and trombones and all kinds of different instruments. So I was around music a lot. My parents loved music. They didn't really play it, with the exception of my mom, who played organ and piano pretty well. But I was also raised in a religious family. We went to church. My mom made us get up every Sunday and go to church. And I would sit next to her, and while they sang the songs, she was singing harmony. So I sat next to her, and without knowing it, got drilled into my head how to sing harmony. Until one day I was in a band, and we started singing, and they said, "What are you doing?" I don't know. I'm singing. And they said, "Yeah, but you're singing weird stuff." Well, yeah, I came to find out later. Well, that's harmony, and I just knew how to do it automatically from that experience as a kid.
Well, people have it naturally, and who I think another friend of ours are the Cowsills. I think that you talk about a family. Sibling harmony. Every time when I think of people saying, "Oh, it just came naturally," I think of the Cowsills.
Oh yeah, well, they were the inspiration for the Partridge Family.
Absolutely, and they were the precursor to the Jackson 5 and the Osmonds.
That's right, and they're really cool people to hang out with too.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
a lot of
We've had
friends
Paul,
of ours.
Yeah, Paul and Bob have been on the show, and Susan, if you're listening, the invitation is still open. So. You grew up in Southern California. You had music as an influence. Your parents. Did you high school, college? Did you ever study classically in any way, or were you?
No, not at all. I'm kind of self-taught. I did take a few guitar lessons, and I had a little bit of band experience playing trombone, but mostly just by ear and picked up what I learned.
Okay, so you've been a musician a long time, and you played with bands, been out of bands. Do you remember listening? Or we listened to the radio. It was a very it was powerful because it wasn't. People didn't always have tape recording equipment. You had to turn on the radio to listen to the hits.
That is true.
When you in your influential years, who were the bands you liked?
Well, I heard the Association. I didn't know who they were at the time because I was kind of young. but I liked what I heard. I remembered what I heard. And also Three Dog Night was about the same time period. Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Deep Purple, if you want to go to the other end of the spectrum. Deep Purple, UFO, Led Zeppelin, of course. So I got a pretty wide variety of exposure.
Okay, standard fare. That's I can understand that. So, association music, it's complicated. It's tough. Do you have a particular favorite song that you just love playing or singing on?
I have a couple of favorites. Along Comes Mary, just because of it's got a gang of words in it, and people can't figure it out. And there was a time that I sang lead on that, and it's a mouthful. And everybody wants to know what it means. Of course, if you don't know what it means, then you're probably never going to know.
Yeah.
The next one would be Cherish, just for its vocal arrangements and just for its sheer complexity. It's a wonderful song. We still do it in the original key. We use no harmonizers, no auto-tune, no backing tracks. So it's still done live, completely live.
And folks, if you're not aware, as a lyric baritone, that's really what my range was. That's a difficult song to sing. You have to stretch that range to do that song well.
It's a tough one, yeah.
It's a tough one. And Russ Jaguar would always say that bottomed him out, basically. And it was tough. It is a tough song to sing. Go ahead.
Okay, and then another song that really, really gets me is Requiem for the Masses. It was such a political statement. It was such an anthem for those who were in Vietnam at the time. And so much so, it had so much influence, I guess the DJs at the time had started flipping Never My Love over and playing the B-side, which was Requiem for the Masses. And it got so much response and so much attention that it caught the attention also of the Nixon White House. And they apparently made a call to Warner Brothers or whoever it was and said, hey, tell your DJs to cut it out.
That is a great story. Could you imagine? Big Dick over there saying, don't want the association playing.
That association, we can't have that.
That's right. I actually also was familiar with Requiem for the Masses because that song was arranged for choirs. And it's done quite often because as a training tool because of the Latin and that type of genre. So I'm guessing old Kirkman, he sold a lot of copies on that with the song, the melody, and sheet music because I remember it from in our files in our high school that the choir back in the 60s did that. Yeah, it's a powerful song, a very powerful song. And if those of you are interested, you can go on YouTube and see the Smothers Brothers show. I don't know if you're aware of this, Paul, but that's I think that's where they debuted it. And Ted Luschel is playing like a field drum.
He is. He's playing a marching snare, and that's a very unique video. It's one of the very first music videos, actually. And you'll notice that when Terry, I believe after the first verse, Terry steps off of a part of the stage, and the rest of the band around him starts revolving. Very cool.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Right. Yeah, powerful song. Powerful song.
Very powerful.
Yeah. Any other album tracks you like that come to mind?
Yes. There was the last album the band did was called Waterbeds in Trinidad, and it came out at pretty much the wrong time, I guess. I guess the Eagles at that time were just getting popular, and so they kind of took over everything in popular music. So, Waterbeds in Trinidad didn't do as well as it should have, and I think there's some fantastic music on that. And we're trying to work up some of that for the live show, for the current show.
Oh, that's great. I'll tell you, one of my favorites, and I make no bones about it, I love Looking Glass. Jules Alexander's song, and I'd love to see that. Everybody knows that that's one of my favorite songs. I love the guitars. It's kind of like a Spanish sounding the way they play it with the fuzz on that. It's a great song, and there's just so many, but that's interesting. Some of the albums tracks that you mentioned, and a lot. I don't think, obviously, the Waterbeds album is not as well known, but it's amazing. At the time, whatever big radio, big music is being pushed, i.e., the Eagles. Great stuff stays kind of like in the repository, and is relegated to a certain area. And, the association, a lot of people were suffering through that. But you're right. Their catalog it's complete. It is, I guess the great word is replete with great songs. So these days when you play, you're playing as a sextet, and how many dates a year would you say you played in the last year, 2 years? What's the frequency? Now, you're not with them on the Happy Together tour right now, correct?
No, that tour has half the band for budgetary reasons, I guess, and the other part of the band, we're just kind of waiting for it to be over, and then we'll pick up where we left off.
Okay, I've been to I don't know how many concerts I've been of the association. Unfortunately, I have not met you, but that will come. For those of you listening in the Indiana area, the association will be playing at the State Fair with the Happy Together tour. Actually, the concert is free. And that's a great marketing tool by the State Fair Board. All you have to do is pay to get into the State Fair. So I just wanted to mention that. So if I recall, in addition to doing the association gig, aren't you in like technical sound, or you are a sound engineer?
I am, yes. I do sound design as well as front of house mixing of shows, and I've mixed everything from Broadway shows to, the last thing I did that was a lot of fun for me was the motels with Martha Davis.
Oh, that's cool.
Just had a wonderful time with that.
So, you're just seeing, all kinds of things. And I bet, like me, there are some days that the equipment just doesn't function the way you want it.
That is true, because the equipment is equipment, and even if it's digital, that sometimes adds another angle to problems that you could have. But I found that if you get a bunch of microphones and put them on stage, and then have something good happen in front of them, then your job becomes pretty easy, and it's just you just rely on the experience you have, and it's always great to mix a really good band.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. When you're on stage with the association and you think back of their long history, what are your feelings?
Oh, it's just such an honor to be up there with them. And when I look across the stage and I see, all the original members that are there and have been and sometimes aren't there anymore, it's just such an honor to be associated, if you'll pardon the pun,
sure,
with this group of people. And there's so much talent there, and so much we're like a family. We're if we have days off on the road, somebody will call up and said, "Hey, I found this really cool thing. Let's go check it out." And everybody says, "Okay, let's go." And it's like a field trip for us. Oh
yeah, well, they are great guys. They all do a great interview. I don't know. This isn't really inappropriate to say. They were playing up near Fort Wayne, Indiana. I live in Muncie, and that's not too far away, about 50 minutes. And they're playing in this lodge. It's like in Amish country here in Indiana, and they were staying in these little cottages. And they were waiting on me. They had waited a while. Good thing I showed up with some wine. But Russ Jagger, I'm not kidding, he was like in a one-piece pajama with rabbits all over it. It was, I will never forget that, here he comes out. And he's singing, and they'll bring up a tune from, we like that song from the Modern Folk Quartet or Hi-Lo's or what have you. And he's like in a onesie. Just at first I thought, are we a half bubble off plum or what? But it was a great time.
It was Janie and the Bunny, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was just kind of surreal. So, also been to a couple of sound checks with them up in Fort Wayne, and they've always been so gracious with their time. Have never met Terry Kirkman in person, but gives a great interview. They got great stories, great points of view, diverse too. They weren't all from California. So they all,
That's true, yeah.
Jules Alexander coming from Tennessee. When you would talk with him today, that would be like, you're from where? I mean, it just, when you meet him and talk with him, he's so, voluble and can talk about so many things. Just interesting people. But, you have a great gig going on there. And Paul Wilson said basically the same thing, that you put it all together, and it's so much bigger than the part. And
it is, yeah.
Yeah, it is. So, we're coming up here at the top of the hour. I want to thank you for being so generous with your time.
You're most welcome. I'm really honored to be part of this. And shout out to Paul Wilson as well.
Yeah.
The orchestrator of this whole madness.
Yeah, Wilson's our friend. We'll give him a little bit of credit there. We love doing this, and I think we're great storytellers. The association, I said earlier, they're family to us here at CRD. And, one night I'm going to have to do a 6-hour marathon of songs. And by then I probably have the phone system figured out. I probably have 12 hours of interviews, folks. And I know I ought to put them together, or at least file them with the Ball State Library so you could have them. And of course,
Absolutely.
Larry now has passed, but I do have a lot of great clips with him. Just funny guy. I had a lot of fun with Larry. Some of the weirdest and coolest and funniest things, and just over the years, I learned a lot from him. Jordan Cole said the same thing, and Jordan Cole said that he was always making sure that you looked good on stage, dress, and you go back and look at the guys when they're playing in 67, 68. They were dressed to the nines. Yeah. I mean, those were really cool stuff. That was really cool stuff. And I like on the Ed Sullivan Show, they appeared and they were doing Along Comes Mary, slowed down. Terry Kirkman's up on stage. It looks like he's wearing a tablecloth, sporting those mutton chops. Looks like a mean Chuck Norris. I'll tell you what.
And that was just cutting edge at the time.
Absolutely. So again, we want to thank you very much, Paul, and hope you'll come back and keep playing. We'll be out there seeing you. We'll check the website to know where you're playing. And again, thank you very much for being our guest tonight.
Absolutely, Kevin. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, great. Coming up, we've got the last of the Pauls in the Paulology Psychopolic. Mr. Paul Wilson. Yeah, he's the talent. That's what they say. Well, time to pay another bill, and we're going to do that and get back to you. This is WWHI Muncie and WCRD on the net.
Whether you're in a scramble to stay on track or just looking for a way to lighten up your course load, Ball State Online is the solution. With more than 300 online courses being offered this summer, you can earn credits toward your Ball State degree while you intern, travel, or even tackle a summer job. Registration is open now, so you can view the full list of courses offered at bsu.edu/online/summer. Stay on course this summer with Ball State Online.
My name is Meera Batra, and this is How I Live United. Many families have come to America for a better life. I advocate for these families with United Way. United Way empowers them to see opportunities available. We help them get involved with their kids' schools and network within the community. My name is Meera Batra. I help families see opportunity and succeed. I don't just wear the shirt, I live it.
Give, advocate, volunteer, Live United. Go to liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council. Looking for uncommon talent? Meet the grads of life. They're not the typical candidates you're used to, but they're exactly who your company needs. An ideal fit for entry-level positions, internships, and even mentorships. Go to gradsoflife.org to learn more. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
1 minute past 7 o'clock here on 91.3 WCRD. You're in tune with Pleasant Valley Sunday. I'm your host, Kevin Nolley, and we are talking to the three Pauls that are affiliated in the past, the present, and probably the future. They're the associates that make up the association. And if we hit the button right this time, let's see who's there. Trying to see if Paul Wilson is here. Paul, are you there? Okay, 1 second. Are you there now, Paul?
I'm here again as well.
Okay, hey. I figured it out, only 2 tries. Paul Wilson, you've been on my show. I played your music. It is good. You're a great musician. You are a great guy. You're a philosophy lecturer, professor. You teach down at that little college, UT something. Little college. I'm just toying with you. And
I'm sorry. Who are you calling for?
Yeah. Yeah,
Hi, Kevin.
That's right.
Thanks for having the Pauls on the show.
Well, it's been great. Like I said, I've never talked with Paul Beach or Paul Holland.
And that was my main motivation. But to be honest, my second motivation was I was hoping that you'd be able to have us all on at the same time, because I just wanted to see how you would handle three Pauls in the same room, and when you told me that it was just going to be one at a time, I was like, oh.
Okay, hey, this is true story. When we have the students and the engineers, I remember Jewel Alexander's and Terry Kirkman.
That Jules Terry show was a great show.
That was a great show. And, I mean, it can be done. I know that. And you people out there, you're friends, and you've heard me do this, and you're like, how can he keep messing up week after week? The truth is, you're only in here 2 hours a week, so it's not like I sit here 40 hours a week.
You're doing a great job. You're the voice of Ball State, Kevin.
I better be careful about that. There's probably a trademark. I'm sure we pay someone to be the voice of Ball State. But you know what? I'm an alum. I'm an employee. I love it here. But, Paul, you have had so many interactions with the association, and you've actually had a chance to play with them. Tell us about that experience.
I want to make sure that it's to any listeners out there that I just got to do one show with the band, so I'm by no means don't have the tenure that Mr. Beach nor Mr. Holland have, but if I may, I guess I would just explain the happenstance to being able to play with them. It was wonderful. In many ways it was just like any other gig, but I met Jules Alexander in the mid 90s, probably 94 or 95. And we met through my good friend John Conley. I was playing in a band with John. John was doing an internship working for Jules's wife, Cynthia. And he'd heard that John had a band, came to see one of our rehearsals, and they were one of my favorite groups at the time. And the thing that struck me about Jules immediately was his. He's always treated me like a peer. He's never treated me like a kid. Even though when he met me, I was only 22, I think. And he's always been very supportive of my musical endeavors. And of course, recently, with Larry becoming ill and eventually, unfortunately, passing away, Jules came back into the band in the last, I guess, 5 years or so. So there came a time when he knew that Paul Holland was not going to be able to make a show, And he said, "Do you want to do a gig with the association?" And I said, "Well, hell yeah, when and where?" And the timing worked out perfectly. And I went up to Monroe, Wisconsin, and I played guitar with the guys. I'm really a bass player, probably predominantly. That's what I usually get called for. But just like the other Pauls said, it's just like family. These guys are down to earth. They're humble. There's just a lot of laughter, a lot of great stories. Prior to the gig in Wisconsin, Jim Yester had come in town. I want to say this is a couple of years before that. They had a little time in between two gigs. They had a gig in Austin and then another one in Houston, and Jim was staying with Jules for a couple of days. So I came over with a guitar, and we were playing just random album cuts. We did like "Look at You, Look at Me," one of Terry's songs, and just jammed. And I, if I'm correct, I think it was actually Jim who suggested that I sub for Paul Holland. It wasn't necessarily Jules' suggestion. Not that Jules didn't have a lot to do with it, but
Sure.
But yeah, it was. Before I blather on too much, I played guitar. I was well prepared. I worked on the vocal parts of Jules. I got to play lead guitar on Enter the Young and the riff on Six Man Band, and it was very overwhelming. Only when I looked up, and they have this montage that they'll often play before sets. If they do a 2-set concert, then they'll do a video montage of all of their television performances. And so it was only when I looked up and I was looking at the footage of the Smothers Brothers and Ed Sullivan, and I was just thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I just couldn't believe it. But once that was over, it was just like any other gig, and they're a wonderful group of guys. They're a lot of fun. I'm a fan, but first and foremost, and you know, I hope I get to play with them in the future.
You know, it is, I'm sure, you know, you were just so excited to get to play with them. And I'll share this personal story. I've been down to see both Paul and Jules Alexander, and one of the things...
Yeah, we know what you look like.
Yeah, that's right.
Even though Facebook
Nobody
doesn't have
knows.
a picture of you.
That's right. Got a face for radio. And I got to sing with you guys, and it was... Yeah. I got to mark it off on In Life, you know, because... I really couldn't play guitar, but you know, that Greatest Hits album was a staple in my collection. I knew those songs. I'd heard those songs. I started as an announcer in our little AM station town in Shelbyville, Indiana, playing Never My Love. I know that was one of the ones in, actually we had it on cart, Paul. It looked like an 8-track tape. But that was, yeah, that's right. And they had a tendency to, garble. But, you know, they were a staple. And I think you had the same way. You had bands, and you like the Monkees, the Association.
I love the Monkees. I love all the 60s pop groups. In fact, my sister Sarah is listening now. I have 5 sisters and 1 brother. Our dad plays guitar and sings. We all sing. I mean, everybody in the family carries a tune, but I would say of the siblings that it's probably myself and 4 of my sisters that are pretty good harmony singers. My sister Lisa is also she was a music teacher at one point. She plays piano. So but this is a thing that relates to the upbringing with family and singing. I was, when we were coming back from the gig the morning after, I was standing in line with Dell. You know, I just wanted to get everybody's sense of how it went. I was getting really good feedback, and I was talking with Dell, and he said, man, other than there was a little flub we did just about the same where I didn't stop, you know, the guitar chord with the rest of the group. But he said, man, other than that one little guitar part and just about the same, it sounded great. And I said, well, you know, I grew up with learning harmonies with my sisters, and you know, since I was a little kid, and that, so I've been listening to this stuff my whole life. And Dell looks at me real wide-eyed. He says, "I can tell." So that was a big compliment. The guys were just very gracious. All of them. I love all the guys. I look forward to hanging out with them whenever I can. But yeah, I was listening to music that was a little bit before my time.
Sure.
And so consequently, that's just kind of the stuff that I like the best. It's funny. Jules has said something similar. Of course, he was born in 1943, and the music he likes best of all of the music of the 20th century is stuff from before his time as well. He says he likes 30s and 40s music. Which I thought was interesting, given his role in being formative for pop music as a member of the association. But yeah, and you and I are about the same age. We both, I guess, grew up on this stuff that was just a little bit before our time.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think the association, the Beatles, the Monkees, all the 60s pop groups had some of the best stuff, and that's. So I'm just tickled that I got to have that experience, and that's my story.
You're sticking to it. Hey, a piece of trivia, Paul. The association played Ball State twice, in '67 and in '70. And I actually, at one time, had the Ball State Daily News story posted. They were talking.
Really?
Yeah. It was they had a picture of Terry Kirkman in that the long suit that he always wore, and he was talking about Requiem for the Masses. And actually, you could tell that the group didn't all feel the same way about what was going on politically. And
interesting.
Larry felt kind of the opposite at that time. And you can read the article. I can post that again. But an interesting story. And Terry was relating how he was scared for the government, the secrecy and the big war machine, and talking about that, and having friends, not coming home. It was, I think a lot of us, you and I, we're in our 40s. We didn't ever think about a draft other than going down to sign for it. We've heard of things of the Vietnam War, but we never saw the guys coming back. We were too little. And so it wasn't in our face with a body count every night. The things I probably, and I don't want to speak for you, but the worst thing I've seen is 9/11. So my frame of view, military, I don't know. I couldn't share that with people that grew up like these guys because, just a different time. And Terry Kirkman and Jules Alexander, weren't they? I think they were both in the military.
Oh yeah, Jules was in the Navy. Jules was in the Navy during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Okay.
Terry was in the National Guard, if I remember him correctly. Jimmy was in the Army. Yep. Jim and Terry are the oldest guys in the band. They were both born in '39. So they did their. Then my father was born in 1932. He was in Korea. He was there after the Korean War. But so it was expected to go and serve, and so most people, most baby boomers and older did that, and we live in a time where fortunately we don't necessarily have to do that, but yeah, they lived in a scary time, and so it's interesting that the guys that we're talking about, I don't know if the other guys in the band had a military career, but I know Jules and Jim and Terry did.
Yeah.
But yeah, they served before the Vietnam War for sure.
Paul, I want to thank you for orchestrating this event tonight. And
I just thought it would be cute if three Pauls were on the air, and I didn't mean to talk as long as I did, but I really wanted to get the Beach and Holland story because you hadn't had them on, especially both of them. I just got acquainted with Paul Beach through Facebook. Paul Holland is a wonderful, cheerful guy. He's just he's good, fun to be around. He's just always in a good mood, and I just wanted to have their stories told, and I appreciate you hosting the party, my friend.
Well, you're quite welcome. Again, I want to thank Paul Beach, Paul Holland, and, of course, Paul Wilson, great friends of the station.
You're going to play some association songs now, I assume, right? At least a couple.
You know, right now, I think the thing to do is to thank everyone that has served our country.
Absolutely.
Military, fire, police, teachers, people that serve our country day in, day out, giving far more than they ever get back. And this song, great song, well written, well orchestrated. From 1967, here's Requiem for the Masses, 91.3 WCRD.
Mama, forget your pies. Have faith they won't get cold. And turn your eyes to the bloodshot sky. Your flag is flying full. At half-mast for the matadors who turned their backs to please the crowd, and all fell before the bull. Red was the color of his blood flowing thin. Pallid white was the color of his lifeless skin. Blue was the color of the morning sky. He saw looking up from the ground where he died. It was the last thing ever seen by him. Kyrie Mama, forget your pies. Have faith they won't get cold. And turn your eyes to the bloodshot sky. Your flag is flying full. At half-mast for the matadors who turned their backs to please the crowd. And all fell before the bull. Black and white were the figures that recorded him. Black and white was the newsprint he was mentioned in. Black and white was the question that so bothered him. He never asked, he was taught not to ask what was on his lips as they buried him.
Requiem for the Masses, the Association. Dad, I know you're listening. Thank you for your service to our country.
Whether you're in a scramble to stay on track or just looking for a way to lighten up your course load, Ball State Online is the solution. With more than 300 online courses being offered this summer, you can earn credits toward your Ball State degree while you intern, travel, or even tackle a summer job. Registration is open now, so you can view the full list of courses offered at bsu.edu/online/summer. Stay on course this summer with Ball State Online.
I want to make something of myself.
I want to succeed. The National Guard recruiter helped me get where I wanted to go. The Guard is providing me with paid training.
In the National Guard, I get money for college plus a steady paycheck.
In the Guard, I train near my home.
I'm there for my family, my community, and my country. And I'm proud to be a member of the National Guard.
Call 1-800-GO-GUARD and ask how you can get the education and job skills you need in the National Guard.
Sponsored by the Indiana National Guard, aired by the Indiana Broadcasters Association and this station.
Cool! There are some moments only the forest can inspire. Find yours at discovertheforest.org. Learn about forests near you and discover cool things to do when you go. Visit discovertheforest.org.
Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
I'm jumping in with my clothes on!
Most party fouls are pretty dumb, but if you decide to drink and drive underage, you could lose your license and your freedom. Learn more at ultimatepartyfoul.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
91.3 CRD, you're in tune with Pleasant Valley Sunday. Good evening, Kevin Nolley here with you. 22 minutes past 7 o'clock. We've just had a great show tonight. 3 great interviews during the last hour and 15 minutes. I want to thank Paul Holland, Paul Beach, and Paul Wilson being gracious with their time. 91.3 CRD, we're always better.
You're listening to WWHI Muncie, Indiana, WCRD 91.3 FM, always better radio.